Hello everyone, this is Bikiron Dhar. I am a faculty in the Department of English in RBC College, Naihati, and I'm recording this video today for the students of English learners who are in second semester currently. And our topic for today is a poem by Henry Louis Vivian Derozio. The name of the poem is Freedom to the Slave. Okay, so let us actually, before we move on to the poem, talk a bit about the poet. Just some 2 or 3 points, okay? Now, what comes into our mind when we think about or talk about the name Derozio? Well, as we all know, that Derozio was a great educator. He was an influencer because his teachings were never limited to the peripheries of classroom only. His teachings in a way changed the lives of many of his students. And thirdly, and the most important point, is that Derozio, the name, had a legacy that was reflected in the Young Bengal movement. Now, what made Derozio the sensation among his students? Well, he joined Hindu College in the Department of English Literature and History in the year 1828. He was the man who introduced Western philosophies, Western ways of thinking in his classroom. Now, it was 19th century Bengal, and religious orthodoxy, a lot of malpractices were prevalent at that time in our society. Well, Derozio talked about free will, foreordination. He talked about the hollowness or the shams of priesthood, the falsehood of idolatry. So his teachings had a lingering impact on the lives of his students as they started asking questions, started criticizing the malpractices which were prevalent in society. Now, this actually resulted in the expulsion of Derozio from the college, as he was found guilty of teaching atheism among his students. Now, one can find a connection between Derozio and Shelley over here, simply in the fact because Shelley was also expelled from the institution, from the university, because of writing and circulating the particular pamphlet, The Necessity of Atheism. Anyway, more information on Derozio is available. Informations on Derozio are widely available on internet. If you are interested, you can definitely search. You can definitely do your own research and find out more information on Derozio. Now let us move on and talk about the poem. So, the poem Freedom to the Slave starts with a quotation. Now, this quotation is a line from a work by Thomas Campbell. The name of the work is The Pleasures of Hope. Let us read the line first. As the slave departs, the man returns. Now, this is an interesting line, and you may ask this question, that the slave and the man, are they two different persons? Well, I think no. I think they are one and the same, and the author wants to mean that only when the chains, the shackles are removed from the slave, then and then only he will be able to understand and appreciate the value of his existence. Only when the shackles are removed, then the man will return. Now, this theme will be echoed, this theme will be repeated throughout the poem for several times. Now, This is a poem of 28 lines. So, for a better understanding, we should divide the poem in two parts. Why do I make this division? Because there are two different themes in the play. In the first part, which will contain the 20 lines, the first 20 lines, it is about a person who had been a slave for so long a time suddenly comes to know that he is a slave no more. Then, how would he react? How would he behave with his newfound freedom? Derozio portrays that. Derozio portrays the condition of the slave who had been a slave for so long a time, but he is a slave no more. He suddenly comes with an understanding with his newfound freedom. So this is the first part. This is about his reactions. This is about his understanding. This is about his jubilation as he finds his freedom. The next part is a clarion call. The next part is, well, it is the necessity for patriotism, as Derozio makes a clarion call to the people of our country, and he urges everybody to join the fight for freedom. How? For that, let us read the poem. Now that we have made a division, let us read the first part of the poem. That means the first 20 lines. Now, when you are listening to this recording, I would like to ask you to at least look at the poem if possible, because it will facilitate the learning and it will help you to understand the poem better. Anyway, let us read it. Read the first 20 lines, of course. How felt he when he first was told a slave he ceased to be? How proudly beat his heart when first he knew that he was free. To noblest feelings of the soul to glow at once began. He knelt no more. His thoughts were raised. He felt himself a man. He looked above, the breath of heaven around him freshly blew. He smiled exultingly to see, as the wild birds as they flew. He looked upon the running stream that beneath him rolled away, then thought on winds and birds and floods, and cried, I am free as they. O freedom, there is something dear even in thy very name, that lights the altar of the soul with everlasting flame. Now, when we read this, a picture comes into our mind. A picture of the man who had been a slave for a long time. Now the man is free. Now the shackles are gone. Now the man is not a slave anymore. So his heart is filled with pride. His heart starts beating with the newfound joy. So that is why he kneels no more, because his chains are removed. Now, this definitely takes us, or just for reference actually, we can compare this, because this kneeling down is definitely kneeling down to authority, kneeling down to our gods and goddesses, as we have done, we regularly do every day. Anyway, so kneeling down, it is a symbol, it is a sign to show your loyalty to the authority. Now when the man is free, he does not need to show his loyalty to any person. He does not need to show his loyalty to a master. That is why he kneels no more. This takes us to a novel by Daniel Defoe. The name of the novel is Robinson Crusoe. Now we know that Man Friday kneels down to show loyalty to Robinson Crusoe. Now, when this man, as depicted by uh, Derozio, when he received the news of his freedom, he feels that there is no necessity for him to kneel down anymore. Now he is free. So now his shackles are removed. Now the man is free. So he needs not to kneel before any authority. So that makes him a proud man. That makes him to perceive the joy and all the happiness around him. He becomes a happy man, he becomes a free man. So that is why the breath of heaven, that is the air, feels to him, appears to him as fresh. Now when he had been a slave, definitely he had felt the air, he had breathed the air, but now the air has a new meaning. It appears to him as fresh, all because this man has acquired freedom. Whatever he is experiencing, say for example, he smiled exultingly to see as the wild birds as they flew. Now exalting means extreme jubilation, extreme happiness. Now why is he happy? He is happy because he is a slave no more, because he is a free man. Now that is why he discovers his existence and the nature around him in a new light. That makes him extremely happy. Now the wild birds, he looked upon the running stream that beneath him rolled away, and then on winds and birds and floods. Now definitely this, again, for you, for a particular reference, I would like to request you to read a particular poem by Maya Angelou. The name of the poem is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Now if you read the poem, there Maya Angelou makes a distinction. She will compare the conditions of a free bird and a caged bird. So if you read the poem, you will be able to understand that why the man is extremely happy when he discovers his newfound freedom. Now one particular issue I would like to discuss here with you, that when you can actually compare the situation or the condition of the man to, say for example, we imagine a man who had been blind for so long a time. Now when suddenly he discovers, or when suddenly he goes through a surgery and he gains vision, now what will happen to that man? Now when he gains vision, how the world will appear to him, almost the same reaction is there, as we can see from the lines of the poem. Almost the same reaction we can find in the man who suddenly gains the news of his freedom after being a slave for so long a time. So this is all about the first part. Now the second part. Before we move on to the next part, let me add one word more. The man who had been a slave for a long time, once he receives the news of his freedom, he starts discovering everything around him in a new light. So perhaps that is why the air appears to him as the breath of heaven. Now, it is the same air which he felt and breathed when he was a slave. However, that was for survival. It is only when the shackles are removed and the chains are gone, then the same air appears to him as the breath of heaven. So A change in perception, a change in our perception will come only when we will kneel no more. So, with this, let us move on to the next part. That means read the last 8 lines of the poem. Success attained the patriot sword that is unsheathed for thee, and glory to the breast that bleeds nobody to be free. Blessed be the generous hand that breaks the chain a tyrant gave, and feeling for degraded man gives freedom to the slave. Now it appears, these lines appear to be a prayer, and it reminds us of the famous line, "Into that haven of freedom, my father, let my country awake." The line, the famous line from where the mind is without fear. Let us notice the lines. Success attained the patriot sword that is unsheathed for thee. Now, unsheathed means to uncover. It seems that the man, after receiving the gifts of freedom, is now praying for the success of his liberator. He is praying for the success of all the patriots who are fighting for the freedom of the motherland. Now, perhaps that explains the 2 lines. Success attains the patriot sword that is unsheathed for thee, that is unsheathed for freedom. The same man again is praying for a divine blessing for the breaker of his chains. Notice the 2 lines. Blessed be the generous hand that breaks the chain a tyrant gave. Again, the same man is praying for the patriot who felt the plight of the slaves and brought freedom to them. These lines also appear to be a prayer of the poet who teaches the countrymen the necessity for patriotism through these lines, almost in the same tone of Shelley as he appeals to the people of England to stand against the tyranny of the rulers in the poem A Song to the Men of England. Now let us discuss some questions. Now the first and the most expected question from this poem, as you all know, will be write a critical appreciation of the poem Freedom to the Slave. Another long answer type question will be illustrate with examples the noticeable changes that appear in the behavior of the slave once he receives the news of his freedom. Some short answer type questions will be what does the breath of heaven refer to in the poem? Another question will be who is the tyrant in the poem? Another short answer type question will be who is the degraded man in the poem Freedom to the Slave? Now, before we conclude, I would like to request you to remember that it is not only geographical or the physical freedom that Derozio talks about in the poem Freedom to the Slave. It is also about intellectual emancipation. We need to remember that only then we will reach our full potential when we will kneel no more. With this, I would like to conclude and hope you are all staying healthy, hope you are all staying safe during this lockdown period. I hope we will meet soon again. Thank you for listening.